great. It is October 8th. Yay! I've been really symptomatic, so I apologize in advance. I might be a little space cadet and forgetful. But, kind of new stuff-ish. I think I've spoken about it before. But I've decided that I'm done renting, and my lease is ending in May, and I'm going to build a tiny home. And it's going to be a little morbid talking about this stuff. But not just because I racked up of how much money I've spent on renting alone within the last 3 years of moving back to my hometown, which is crazy, but definitely thinking of my chronic illness, and especially the fact about 1.5 years ago, they told me that I could be in fact terminal, and I had to rewrite up my will and everything, and have some serious talks with some serious people about my finances and debt and my wishes. I started really thinking that going forward, the process of death and dying, especially in American culture, is really expensive. And a lot of people think that when you die, your debt kind of like goes with you. It doesn't. It actually spreads out onto the immediate family that you're connected to. And even the process of dying, if I, say, wanted to be pretty much guzzled out and repumped in with chemicals and put into a casket and have a plotting, that's actually really expensive, let alone a casket that is like unquote unquote like federally regulated. You can't just put me in a box. Is really expensive. Generally they start at $20,000 and up, let alone the plotting and the headstone. So and I'm still trying to debating what I want. I know that a part of me just kind of would like to decompose in the earth, but that's not legal. I shouldn't even say technically. It's not legal in New York State. I don't even think it's legal anywhere else. So I started thinking, and one of the reasons when I was talking to my father about wanting to build a tiny home is that I could live in it, my expenses would be low, especially when I graduate from my grad program. I'm going to have student loans that I'm going to have to pay into, and the job economy is still really unsteady, so I'm not even sure that I have a guaranteed job when I get out there, or how long it's going to be until I get a said job to pay for my bills. And if it was one less thing to worry about, which was a lower RG&E bill, electric and heat bill, a lower utilities bill, other than those two items, a lower rent bill, would be building a tiny home. And I'm doing a tiny home on wheels, which gets me around a lot of building permits and codes and actually having a plot of land. Because also another big thing is that after getting my license in mental health counseling, is that I do not plan on staying in New York State. So buying a property is not really conducive to some of the goals that I would like to do. Also, this whole parameters of thinking this so long term is really hard for me to think, especially since 1 year ago I was told that I was going to be dead soon. So my whole perspective of life and seeing, prospectively further out for me, I have my tug and pull about, because there are times where I really like to take hold of life and live in the now and to really appreciate everything I'm given. And sometimes it's really hard to see me from here, especially since I still remain undiagnosed, and a couple months ago I had an oncology appointment. So there's a lot of conflicting things. But one thing I was talking to my father about is that not only the thinking about lower bills and being able to pay other stuff, 'cause rent alone is a really big chunk of money that's getting eaten out of your pie of income. I mean, when I was working my shitty job, rent was probably about a good 2/3 chunk of my pie. So even just thinking about that, even if I had to pay rent to a land lease, it's really a lot cheaper than paying rent. Also, if I were to be dumping money into it, it would be something I made, and it would be a long-term investment that I can control. So that was one component. But other than financially terms, the other reason why is if I were to die early in life, which has been spoken to me on many occasions, it gives me the option to not have that burden on other people. You wouldn't have to deal with a mortgage. You won't have to deal with taxes on the house itself. You wouldn't have to deal with, like, expenditures of the wazoo. It's also, the third component is that as much as I have a lot of goals in life and things I really want to do before I expire, and I've recognized that some of those things I may not be able to do because of some of the illnesses and symptoms that I have, and also, like, if I do have a devastating diagnosis or something, which are half of the things I'm still on my list are devastating, and life detrimental. Building a home is kind of like one, like, last thing I could really do. Something that I physically can do, which is a big emphasis of, like, everything. Because a year and a half ago, after they're like, oh, you're not probably terminal yet. They did want to take the right away of, my right away to drive. So some of my symptoms, and they've been on that for a while now. They told me that I could be in a wheelchair, they keep on telling me I could be permanently blind. So a lot of those kind of entities, I would have to rely on someone else, and that really scares me, and it still makes me very upset thinking about that, because I'm a very independent person. And not to say that people that have those kind of disabilities or symptoms are not independent, but for me, that's how I feel. So me building a home is, like, my last, like, hurrah of, like, looking, like, it just gives me so much pleasure thinking about it, being like, I built this with my hands and I'm living in it, and, like, this is my last, like, good thing I could leave the world. I'm also planning that to rewrite my will again after that's built, to place it into someone's name so they can actually live in it. So it's kind of like an ongoing, like, there's a purpose in my life, not only, like, my personal purpose of how I feel about living in life and my impact, but I also have, like, an object going forward and, like, passing that through the life. I feel like that's a greater kind of commitment and gift to someone versus having a headstone in a placement. Granted, this is my perceived perspective on everything. I think it's really awesome if you can think of, like, oh, I think it's really great about having a headstone and doing this. I know a lot of people with chronic illnesses and diseases do really amazing shit with their lives, and, like, leaving that forward impact. Also, like, you should know I'm a Buddhist, so thinking about doing something greater for the change, better, bigger than me, kind of, like, wholesome thinking, is definitely really true of my roots. So that is, like, the 3 biggest reasons why I would want to build my own home, which gets tricky because a lot of people are like, oh, I can help you, which I'm great, and I definitely will need help, but I have this one person in my life who wants to take over the whole project and make it super public and, like, have random people in it, and this project is actually really intimate to me because most of people that know that I want to build a tiny home don't really know the whole aspects of why I want to, and really haven't asked me, which is fine. I'm not going to penalize you for that. But it really comes down to me dying and what's going to happen afterwards. And before me dying, of, you know, like, with my tiny home, I'm going to guarantee there's stairs in it. So if I am going to be wheelchair bound or, you know, have a loss of sight, a lot of my stuff in the house will be catered to those kind of facets that might be crippling in my life. So those are big entities, and I thought talking about it would be really interesting, especially someone who has a chronic illness. It's extremely expensive. The last 3 years, I have poured over $10,000 in my medical, like, genre. Like, it's insane. My medical bills, appointments, traveling to and from, advocating, changing stuff, insurances, co-pays, battling insurance companies about stuff. Like, it's, like, extremely expensive, and especially being a young adult who's single and doesn't have strong family ties, especially strong family ties that are super financial, stable, and such. So that is the other financial component of thinking and being like, okay, I have a chronic illness. It may be undiagnosed, but either way, it's going to be chronic. It's going to be long-term. It's a long-term relationship that I personally don't really want to have, especially at age 26. And thinking about all these things, and especially now thinking like I'm going to have student loans, and you know, my type of job is not going to pay that well, and if I have to move, those expenses, a tiny home and building that really kind of fits in everything. It's probably the one best decision I've really made concerning to my long-term goals. So I thought you guys would be interested in learning about that and learning a little bit more, and this also feeds into how my chronic illness and undiagnosis spills into everything else in my life. Hope you guys are hanging in there and have a good day.